Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice, and prison professors, thank you so much for joining our community and this webinar. I've answered my question about how quickly I'm going to the mute button. It took 12 seconds into the webinar for me to mute all of you. I hope you're happy. Okay, of course, if any of you would like to speak, unmute yourself. Also, click the button where the hand will go up. I've been told on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 2 of calling people when the hand is up. I commit to doing better on this webinar. We have Scott Laney, Kent, others who are going to be monitoring questions in the chat box. So please add them. Michael, I owe you a call. Great to see you again. I'm going to make that happen today. Great to see you. So thank you very much for joining our community. Today, we're going to talk about federal probation, do's and don'ts, how to prepare. I encourage all of you to continue to go through all of the myriad resources our team produces daily at Prison Professors. As you know, I'm a director of White Collar Advice. We are a proud sponsor of Prison Professors, where we give everything away for free, including interviews we've done with subject matter experts. In advance of this webinar today, for the 5th time, I listened to the interview with former Chief of Federal Probation, Chris Maloney. I listened to it while running. I'll admit it made the run feel twice as long and hard, but still, for the 5th time, I learned something new. And Chris offers insights that will help all of you, presuming you want to get off probation early, you want to have higher levels of liberty on probation, you want to travel, you may want to run your own business, you don't want to violate either a technical violation or other. So if it is truly in your interest to get what it is I know all of you want, if I 5 times, despite being on probation for 10 years or 11 years, can listen to it, you can certainly spend 48 minutes listening to this really engaging interview with Chris Maloney. It is gold, I tell you. We're going to put a link to this video in the chat box. I encourage you to spend 48 minutes. I've said it 4 times. It's that important, but we're going to be referring to it in this video today. As a reminder, as much as our team would love to change the past, we cannot, nor can we guarantee what's going to happen in the future. I share that because every now and again, someone will reach out and say, I would love a percentage on getting into the drug program or getting out early due to COVID. Can you give me a percentage? I give you no percentage. I cannot change the past. We cannot guarantee what will happen moving forward. What a bureaucrat in prison may or may not do, a bureaucrat that you may or may never meet will do. We believe in self-advocacy, of changing the narrative, of working to demonstrate every single day why you're worthy of leniency and higher levels of liberty, even if it might not have the influence that you would like to that specific person. We encourage you to do the work as the end is coming, and we really encourage you to build that record over a sustained period of time. But of course, the choice is yours. I want to encourage and remind all of you that you're smart and successful, and your judgment throughout your life has helped position you for success. And even though you're going through a little blip in the criminal justice system, it doesn't change that you're smart and you have a skill set and your judgment is sound. And you should trust your own judgment, especially when it comes to what we've learned from experts. For example, a defendant called last week and said, hey, I'm very disappointed because I have written a kind of my release plan. I'm on home confinement and I want to share it with my prosecutor. And my prosecutor admittedly kind of filleted me at my sentencing hearing, but it's been like 3 years. And I really did good work in prison. And I didn't just talk about it, I did it. In fact, my case manager suggested that I should have taught this release plan course in prison. She was so impressed by it. And I'm still in touch with my lawyer, and he likes me and he helps me. But I told him I want to share this release plan with my prosecutor, who basically called me just nothing but a criminal in my sentencing. I think I've changed. And the lawyer dissuaded him from sending it. The lawyer said, don't send it. Don't send it. Don't send it. And he was discouraged. The value of listening to interviews with subject matter experts is it might confirm what you are already thinking. Because in that interview with Chris Maloney, he said, the judge sentenced you. He read the probation report, which is going to portray the worst things you've ever done in your life. He's going to have that version of events, but it could be years before you ever see him or her again. So Chris Maloney, the former head of federal probation, in that 48-minute interview with Michael Santos, suggested if it's the right message, if you have truly built a new record that shows change, he encouraged you to share it with everyone including the prosecutor. This defendant was so happy to hear that. And what is he doing today? He's FedExing his damn release plan to this prosecutor whom he has not seen or heard from in about 3.5 years. I don't know if the prosecutor will read it. And I don't know if at some point when this defendant tries to get off probation early, if this release plan that he sent will help. Most U.S. attorneys tend to deny the request for early termination, in my experience. Either way, it is a very sound step. So if you have great ideas and you're thinking like, I should do this, and you're unsure, ask us, and you know what our response is probably going to be? Great question. We interviewed a subject matter experts through our nonprofit prison professors that answered that exact question. Go do it right now. Get very passionate about it because it's very important, and it made that prisoner's day. As I get going, is anyone here on federal probation right now? Is anyone here on federal probation? Brandon, welcome to the community. Many of you know Brandon Coluccio, great reviews, YouTube video in advance of his surrender, 37-month sentence, got home in about 10 or 11 months, I believe. Brandon, as succinctly as you also wrote a great book prior to his surrender to prison, awesome book. Brandon, in a couple of minutes, can you summarize thus far your experience on federal probation for everyone in our community?
Yeah, happy to. So thank you for asking me to speak. I just wanted to hear your voice and hear all the beautiful pearls of wisdom you're always dealing. So, my time has been, I was accelerated to supervised release from home confinement, I guess, due to first step act credits. So I've been the beneficiary of some good luck throughout the process, but that's because you helped me prepare and do all the right things that set me up to be the beneficiary of a little bit of good luck along the way. I wasn't exactly dealt the best hand in terms of, who my probation officer is. He's a little bit tough. He's a little bit cynical towards me, but I treat him with a tremendous amount of respect. I respond immediately. I pay my restitution on time every month. I submit my form every month on time, provide pay stubs. Like I do everything exactly as I should. And that has helped me kind of, stay in his good graces for the most part. And for the most part, he leaves me alone. But, I from what I've heard from others, he's a little bit more of a stickler than I guess the average probation officer. But so far, no real issue.
In the interview with Chris Maloney, he mentioned sometimes it's more formal than other times in submitting monthly reports. When I was on probation a long time ago, I actually wrote out a report and I would deliver it to my probation officer's office within 72 hours, the first 3 days of every month. Now I know it's online, some email. Are you required to do it every single month?
Yes, you have to do it every single month. And I do everything like the first of every month. I have an alert on my phone. I set a reminder so I don't forget. And it's not that difficult. It's just, basic questions. They ask you about your income, about your, whatever, your address, et cetera. Any issues, any interactions with law enforcement. It's pretty standard stuff. It takes about 5 minutes, right? And it saves your information, so you don't have to fill in the same information every single month. You just have to make adjustments, record your hours for community service, that kind of stuff.
So as you'll learn, there are technical violations, which isn't the breaking of a criminal law that can send people back to prison. And of course, there's breaking a new law while you're on supervised release. So those are two of the ways that people get sent back to prison. In this webinar, I'm just going to share things that I've seen since I've been released since 2009 of reasons that people violated their probation. And in many instances, they were sent back to prison or their period of supervision was extended. And in one instance, I think someone had like 6 weeks left and the probation officer was, I think, sitting on the information for about a year or so, waiting if the defendant would come clean with this mistake, because it had been kind of addressed peripherally. The probationer did not. About 6 weeks before supervision ended, the probation officer went to the judge, wasn't sent back to prison, but the judge gave him 3 fresh years of supervised release. So we want to talk about, it wasn't a criminal, didn't break the law, but it was a technical violation, which in the end would mean that he's going to be on probation for 6 years, which is an inconvenience. So we're going to go through some of the things that we have learned. I'm going to share my screen and one moment. Okay. Share my screen and talk a little bit about the importance of, again, the release plan. And you might be thinking, hey, we discuss this every week. Is there any other subject? Yes, there's a lot of other subjects, but all of this ties in to your release plan. When you listen to the interview with Chris Maloney, and at the end of this blog, we actually put up a link to it. We'll also put a link here in the chat. You're going to hear Chris Maloney discuss the first thing that your probation officer is really trained to do. So when you have about 120 days or so left in prison, you will get assigned a probation officer. That person will visit the home. They'll begin to get more vested in the process, and you'll eventually meet that probation officer in the halfway house or home confinement, or right when you start probation. And they are trained, as Chris Maloney said, to review your file and to immediately look at the probation report. So if you have yet to sit for your probation report, Chris Maloney in this interview says extensively, what are you doing to influence the report? What are you doing for the judge to learn more about you? What are you doing to document how you're changing and what you are learning, both to influence the recommendation at your sentencing, but also to influence the case manager in prison, because he goes on to say the only thing the case manager in prison is going to have is your probation report. Then, of course, the probation officer is going to read it. So many of you are not happy with your probation report. You're not happy with your plea agreement because it portrays you for the worst decision that you've made. And then Chris Maloney goes on to say it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If the average sentence is 3 to 5 years, it could be years before you go in front of that judge again, years before you meet that probation officer. So he asked all of you, well, what are you going to do to build a new record? What are you going to do to demonstrate why you're worthy of leniency, higher levels of liberty, more travel, working for yourself? All of these things he addresses in this video, and he says we just need evidence of it. There's 4 levels of supervision: low, moderate, medium, and high. So they're going to assess you, and I presume the lion's share of you are going to be on the low side, which is great, but that doesn't change. They're going to supervise you, and they're going to evaluate everything you've done from the probation interview until the day you shake that person's hand. It's the reason you've got to be documenting and building a best-in-class release plan and sharing it with every stakeholder, the case manager, the probation officer, everyone in your network. Some people do it by way of a book, like Brandon did, wrote a book. That's his release plan. It doesn't have to be a book. It could start as 10 pages, grow to 100 pages. But if you're not writing and building it, you're not truly prepared to get what you want, higher levels of liberty and more grace on probation. So as you listen to that interview, all of these questions are going to be addressed. And I want you to go through it and then come with more questions in the future. Now let's go to what I have learned, some common probation violations. And I'll tell you, much like some people go to prison and after 3 or 4 months, they get really comfortable and they feel like they own this environment and there's no real problems. They then let their guard down. They get a little bit loose, and that's when bad things can happen. To that end, at the end of this webinar, Jason Larry, who's part of our community, he's at Montgomery. We spoke on the phone earlier this week. He sent some feedback from his first couple of weeks in federal prison, and I'm going to read that. Ron, you might have received that as well, because I know you're communicating with him. But I'm going to go through some of what Jason's learned the first couple of weeks in Montgomery, with hopes that it helps all of you as you get ready to go to prison. And by the way, if I say anything that conflicts with what you've learned, or if your experience is slightly different, Brandon or Matthew, anyone else who's on probation, Scott, please jump in and tell me, because we want to learn and we want to help people. So some of the ways that I've seen people get into trouble on federal probation: traveling outside the district without permission. Brandon, have you traveled thus far since you're on probation?
Sorry, I was trying to off mute. Yes, I have.
Walk everyone through the process to get permission to travel while on federal probation.
Yeah, so domestically, you have to fill out a form, and it's a form your probation officer will give you right at the beginning of the process. And you have to fill in information like where you're going, the reason for going there, who you'll be with, your address, the address, et cetera, your travel plans, whether by car or by flight. And so you submit it to him, and I believe it's 2 or 3 weeks. Mine has been generally pretty flexible. And they have the right to either approve that or deny that. It's totally up to the discretion of the probation officer. I have been allowed to, and then I've also been denied, I think just based on his mood. So he's allowed me to do both. And mine is more a stickler about, okay, well, if you have the money to travel, well, why don't you pay that for restitution? Oh, well, right. So those are some of the things that I think people should expect. But if it's family related stuff or an emergency, I had a friend's parent, very close friend's parent pass away. And so within 48 hours, he was like, look, go ahead, travel. Right. So it's all about your approach, and it's all about, kind of trying to approach him in the most respectful way possible. So.
Very helpful. And that comes back to something that Chris Maloney said in the interview with Michael. Michael was asking him, in what instance would you allow someone to travel or even work with someone who is formerly incarcerated? What does that process look like? And Chris mentioned the value of documenting in your release plan. What are your post-prison plans? What are your goals? Does that goal require travel? Is your business realistic? Is there a model there? Have you built it? If there's an employment opportunity, what is it? And does it require travel? If you owe fines and restitution, are you up to date on your restitution payments? If not, they're not going to approve it. Even in my experience, if you fight and put up a big stink over restitution, you may prevail and win, or if they feel as if you're doing it begrudgingly, you may, lose the battle, win the war, whatever the hell that cliche is. You may win, but then you're going to lose when you want to go to work or travel for a few days. Keep these things in mind. Stay current on restitution. Generally, they do like a couple of weeks notice for travel. In my experience, I needed as little as 72 hours to get approval to travel. Myriad people in prison, this is why you have to use your own judgment, follow your own path, will tell you that you're not going to travel on probation, that you can't work with people who have a felony record. And they're going to continue to say things that frankly turned out not to be true. Day one, I was given permission to work with felons. Day one, when Michael was released from prison, both of our probation officers approved us working. Well, I was already off probation. His probation officer approved us working together. Why? He had documented what our plans and business plans were, all very strategic. When I met Michael, he said, I'm going to look 6 years into the past and the future when I get released. I'm going to reverse engineer it now that will enable us to work together when I come home. It worked to a T. That comes back to the idea of you may do work today or tomorrow or next year that may not pay off for many, many years. Don't listen to what people tell you. It might be right for them. That doesn't mean it's going to apply to you. He also said that probation officers are not inclined to approve personal travel. I tried once on federal probation to travel to a Monday night football game, knowing he would say no. I just wanted to test if he would say no. Indeed, he did say no. When I was traveling the country speaking, I had to turn in a letter from a professor or the business, KPMG or Goldman Sachs, whomever, where I was speaking, on what date, how much I was getting paid, and I sent him my travel itinerary. Every time I landed, I would send him a text message. I just landed in New York. Every time I landed back in Los Angeles, I would send a text message. I have landed in Los Angeles. It was the first thing I did because I always wanted to prove worthy of the fact that he let me travel to Chicago within 2 weeks of getting released from prison. And he approved more than 70 trips throughout my 3 years on probation. The only trip I could not do was to Canada and Europe. I didn't want to go back in front of Judge Wilson to get my passport back. And Canada, as a felon, I was not approved to go into the country. But throughout the country, I traveled more than 70 times. Be patient. Now, Chris Maloney also addressed, if you reach out to your probation officer for a travel request and you don't get a response, what do? You don't just go, as some people do. And if they don't respond in a timely manner, you can write to their supervisor. Hello, I am so-and-so. I request to travel on this date with my probation officer. I haven't heard back. This is work related. Here's the letter regarding this employment. It's essential that I work to continue to pay my court-ordered restitution. He said you might not get the answer you like because the probation officer may feel as if you're going above them. But if you have got to travel, compensation tied to it, you've got to be your own advocate. So he encouraged you to do that if you were not getting the appropriate response. Now, a second reason I have seen, someone asked, why is personal travel limited? Is it a deal? Is it a policy? Well, probation isn't meant to be punitive. Part of the consequence is you're still restricted. So that's kind of how my probation officer portrayed it to me. Like you should be working and making amends and paying your restitution. And if I'm letting you go to a Monday night football game, that gets in the way of you working and paying your restitution. And even one time I took a client to dinner, sushi, and it was an expensive dinner. Sushi's expensive in Los Angeles. My probation officer saw the credit card transaction and he went apoplectic and basically said to me, just pay cash. They think you should be eating at McDonald's because every extra dollar you have should go towards restitution. It was very uncomfortable. And I tried for a moment to explain, this is part of building a business, taking clients to dinner, spending time with, I don't want to hear it. You don't spend $197 at Katsuya on sushi. I don't ever want to see it again. Pay cash. I don't want to see it. Got it. I never did it again. So you want to be very cognizant of how you're spending money, because you are going to turn in these reports every single month. And if you owe restitution, they are really, really on you for your spending pattern. Many of you know, in my case, I actually had to go back in front of my sentencing judge with how I had come into a tax refund. I asked the judge if I could keep a portion of it. He said, hell no. And then he even cut how much I could spend on my credit card every single month. I couldn't spend more than $500 a month on my credit card without permission from my probation officer. Trying to reason with them, like I need credit to print books that I distribute to potential clients. Didn't reason. They don't want to hear it. I couldn't spend more than $500 a month. Be very aware of how you spend money. Never travel outside the district without permission. In one instance, as we go to number 2, this is the person I mentioned earlier that with 6 weeks left, didn't go back to prison, but they extended probation for 3 months. This person traveled outside the district, and he actually lived in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, or you have the Central District of California, kind of to Riverside to Orange County. He was not given permission to travel. He had to go to San Diego. He did, and he bought a cup of coffee at a Coffee Bean. Didn't pay cash. And months later, the federal probation officer audited his financials and noticed that he bought a cup of coffee, a latte, I think actually, at a Coffee Bean. And just like that, he had traveled outside the district without permission by way of this credit card statement. Now, the defendant would say to you, I made a mistake, I should have paid cash. Those are the same rationalizations that got some of us, I know me, sent to federal prison. Not accepting responsibility for his own life. Don't say I should have paid cash. The response should have been, I shouldn't have left the district without permission. I didn't have approval. It's not, wow, I should have paid cash. He never would have known. So it's flawed thinking. Shows maturity and acceptance of responsibility. 3 years added to his federal probation, 6 years, cup of coffee or latte at Coffee Bean. Think about these things if you think you want to travel outside the district. Also, some people travel outside the district, they get a parking ticket. Guess what? You're required to disclose that parking ticket. And that person can then see, wow, oh my goodness, I got a parking ticket. I'm outside the district. That could be a violation of your probation. Plus, is it even worth it? Because the aggravation and stress. I know when I was in the halfway house and I had like 2 hours to get back, all I did was look at my clock the whole time. I might have been at dinner, having a pass, but I was so neurotic about getting back late. I couldn't even enjoy it. I just got to get back. I got to get back. I got to get back. So for those of you who travel outside the district without permission or cross the line, you may get away with it, but it's going to weigh on you as you wonder if you're going to get caught, I think. Number 3, open bank accounts, LLCs, get loans without permission. Brandon, have you had any issues with that? Anyone here on probation tried to open up a bank account, a line of credit, or anything like that and had any resistance from their probation officer?
I haven't had any resistance. The only time I had to do it was while I was on home confinement. The resistance wasn't with the, we'll call it the authorities. It was with the bank. Every bank account I open gets closed.
Yeah,
that's my life. So
you're not alone.
I now have to, like, any kind of financial stuff has to go through my wife or immediate family member, because I literally can't have a bank account. It's crazy. So in some ways that makes it easy. In other ways, it makes it very complicated.
So I want all of you to know that I know people that their probation has been violated. And if they open up bank accounts or LLCs without permission, and it can be as simple as you go to Bed Bath & Beyond, which apparently might be going out of business, but they say, hey, for 20% off, fill out this application. It's no interest for 2 years and you get approved for credit. There are people who have been called by their probation officer for taking that offer at Home Depot or Bed Bath & Beyond. And as benign or insignificant as you thought it might have been because you're saving money, if you are going to do that, you need to get permission from your probation officer. In one instance, I opened up an LLC as a gift to a friend of mine, my good friend Sam Pompeo, and I just did it as his birthday gift. He had done so much for me. My probation officer called me and said, why did you open up an LLC without permission on behalf of so-and-so? It was a problem. I'm in this business, yet I made a mistake. Not terrible, but it was a mistake. And Chris Maloney also said, if you are violating your probation, even if they don't extend your probation or send you back to prison, they are alerting your judge. Your judge is getting notified of any of these violations and how you're doing. In fact, Chris Maloney also said that some judges will reach out to the probation officer and say, how's this guy doing? I sentenced him 5 years ago, 4 years ago. He talks a lot about, accepting responsibility. He sent me this release plan. It's pretty impressive. What's he doing? How's he doing? Tell me about this guy. Your judge will be following you potentially, will reach out to your probation officer. That's why you want to influence them, because it's probably likely that you're going to try to get off probation early. And that's something that you want your probation officer to approve. Many prosecutors tend to say no, but if you are influencing them positively, they may say yes. And ultimately it's up to the judge. I want you to keep all of this in mind. If you make a mistake, they may not violate you the first time. They won't send you back to prison the first time. But according to Chris Maloney, your judge is getting informed. Consider that when you go down to him or her in the future and say, I'd like to get off probation early. Everything matters. Hiding income and not filling out probation forms properly. This happens more than you think, especially with people that owe restitution. I've known people who have not disclosed their income properly. Tax refunds, try to keep it. Kwame Kilpatrick, the former mayor of Detroit, came into a tax refund, didn't turn it over. They immediately sent him to custody. So if you owe money and it says any inheritances, tax lottery, winnings, whatever settlements, has to be turned over to the government and properly disclosed. That's the quickest way I see people get sent back to prison. And frankly, one of the biggest ways people have trouble in probation reports. They don't accept responsibility, or two, they mislead on their financials. I know it's
Justin, real quickly on the inheritance.
Yep.
You're correct. If you don't disclose that, sometimes they just send you straight to the your county prison and send you to prison. And remember something the community should know that it's not upon reasonable doubt. It's upon preponderance of evidence, which means more likely than not, he committed this violation. More likely than not. So it's very low bar. But with inheritances, if it's a irrevocable trust by your parents that left you money, it happened to me. My dad died, and it was an irrevocable trust. I did disclose it, and I stated they can't touch it for 10 years. And irrevocable trust, you can't give it for asset forfeiture or whatever. These are standard. But if it's and you let them know that, then you can start writing a deal. My dad left me 200 grand, and I struck a deal that I would keep 100 grand, and they would get 100 grand. But I didn't go with the judge. I go right to the federal litigation unit attorney that's in charge of me, and they have a lot of resources. It's not like the asset forfeiture division. So again, if it's irrevocable trust, you can just say, fine, neither of us will get the money, and you can't touch it for 10 years. And they know that, but I know it because I'm finishing up law school this semester. But a revocable trust, no, then they can grab it. And it's really hard to negotiate.
That information is very helpful. There are many people in our community who get post-nuptial agreements, who will separate bank accounts, who will work with their family to change inheritances or estate plan. I'm not an estate planning attorney. We want you to be compliant on probation, to disclose things honestly. But this is the part of the reason we're doing this webinar. Decisions may happen in the future, financial decisions, that death can be unexpected. Inheritances can be unexpected. If you're on federal probation and you come into something, you have got to disclose it, and it can create a problem. So we want you to be aware of this. And again, looking many years into the future, writing your release plan today with hopes that it will influence people, not just today, but many years into the future. It's a key component for all of you who are on federal probation if you owe money. Now, continuing on reasons I've seen people violate and get sent back to prison, even not disclosing assets. Some of these probation officers, they're very bright, they're very smart. If Chris Maloney says the first thing they're going to do is look at the probation report, they're going to look at the assets in the probation report. Every asset, everything you owe, everything you borrowed, everything, absolutely everything. Then if they come home, you're home from prison, and they walk into your home and they see a new TV or a new piece of art or a new rug or something expensive, they're going to look to see, was that disclosed in the probation report? Part of when they do, actually, if you owe money, when they come to your home on probation, they're looking around, they're looking at these assets, things to see if you disclose them or not. I've learned that from my probation officer. So things I want you to keep in mind. So there are people who have gotten into trouble for not fully disclosing their assets. And I've seen that repeatedly with crypto, which can be very confusing. I had Bitcoin, but it's in a wallet. I'm not sure. What do I problems? So understand that selling assets or not disclosing it can be a problem, and they're checking in to see if you've acquired new assets down the road and if you've acquired it. Lied about community service. There are a number of people who might get sentenced to 200, 500 hours of community service. I've gotten calls from 3 people since all of them went back. And they didn't go back to prison. They went back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown, which is like real jail. You think of the federal prison camp, cushy. They went back to the Metropolitan Detention Center. They were all part of a case, 3 dudes in the same case. They all lied on their community service work. And they paid someone to say they did the work, and the probation officer called the guy, and the probation officer put him on the spot, and he's like, they haven't really done it. So you're going to go back to prison if you have court-ordered community service work and you're not actually doing it. Do the work. Possession of a firearm. No guns. Not only can you not have any guns, it will get you sent back to prison. I did a YouTube video a couple of years ago about a dentist in Nevada, served 6 months for a tax crime, got caught cheating on his wife. Probation officer showed up at the home. His ex-wife said he's probably at the gun range with his young girlfriend. Probation officer's like, what do you mean gun range? The ex-wife tried to cover it up. Sorry, I didn't say anything. Cat's out of the bag, as cliche holds. New charge, felon in possession of a gun. No guns, get rid of them, please. It's not a probation violation. Remember I said there's violations of probation and there's criminal breaking the law. Violations usually don't get you sent back to prison unless there are several of them. A new breaking of the law, felon in possession of a firearm, the dentist, 6 months for a tax crime, back in prison. No good, no bueno. Okay, think about these things. You should also contemplate if you associate with people that have guns. Now, I'm like crazy neurotic about it. I don't like guns to begin with. I will not even ride in the car with a friend if he has a gun, to be clear. No, I've been in friends' homes where I know they have a gun. It's in the other room. It's locked in a safe. But I have friends who I know they have permission to carry. I won't even go in the car with it. And I've been off probation for 10 years. I don't need the stress. I'm good. And they think I'm a little crazy, a little nuts, but they don't know what it's like to be a convicted felon and go to prison and to be looked at differently. I don't need it. I want you to consider this if you associate with people who have guns. Harassing victims or saying threatening things online. They're scouring your Facebook. They're looking at what you're posting here and on Twitter. You might remember Farmer Bro, Martin Screwley, who texted that he would pay someone to get a lock of Hillary Clinton's hair on pretrial. They then sent him to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. I've known people who got into trouble by their probation officer because on Facebook, they may respond to a negative comment. They may make a post, hey, the criminal's home from prison. And they get into a shouting argument. F you, go mind your own business. You don't know the facts. Here's the truth. And the probation officer can view it as hostile, as threatening, or the person who left the comment can find your probation officer. If it's not the right message online or in your release plan, according to what judges have told us, here's what the message should be. Nothing, say zero, zilch, nada. You have nothing to contribute or say. If it's not the right message, zip it, please, please, because they're watching. They're trained to watch. They're trained to scour everything you're putting out there. It can hurt you, or in my case, it helped me. It helped Brandon with his book. It helped Scott Laney with his website. It helped me with my website in prison. But it was very strategic. I wrote things knowing the case manager was going to read it. I discussed this with Michael in prison when I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to write. People are going to read it. He said, if you're strategic and you have the right message, it will help you. Do you not see that? Do you not understand that? I'm like, no, I don't see it. I don't understand it, but I'm willing to give it a chance with the right guidance. And he gave me that guidance, and here we are. It's got to be the right message, both in your release plan and elsewhere, because they expect us to be duplicitous. They expect us to say, I'm sorry, because we got caught. I only want the drug program to get the year off. I'm paying the money back because I have to, not because I want to make amends to my victims. This is how they think of you. That's their perception of you. So if you write something in a release plan and then you are inconsistent via email in prison, phone in prison, something you post online, they're going to say, here he goes again, saying one thing and doing another. If you're not going to be totally consistent, I encourage you, how do I politely say it, to zip it. Now, if you're going to travel, you have to get permission from your probation officer to switch addresses. Some people just move. Like, why? You just don't move. You're still under supervision. That's going to upset them. Okay. You must get in touch with your probation officer within 2 days. If you or anyone in your household is arrested or questioned by law enforcement, you cannot serve as an informant to law enforcement without express permission. You must have a job that satisfies your probation officer. Now, Michael discussed with Chris Maloney, can you work from home? Every dude in jail says, oh, you can't be self-employed. It's not going to happen. I'm self-employed, Brandon's self-employed, Scott's self-employed, Michael's self-employed. And you hear Chris Maloney say, yes, you can be self-employed, but why? What is the business? What are you doing? What is the network? What is the skill set? Why are you worthy of being self-employed? If you owe restitution, will this self-employment help you make payment? So he says the same thing we hear from judges and case managers. Like, is it in your plan? Can you document to us why you're worthy of being self-employed? If not, go to KFC for minimum wage. I've had a probation officer in Alabama tell someone, go to KFC for a job. We have a pipeline where they will hire you. Get out, go get hired. And while we frequently say all work is honorable, I can tell you this former physician did not want to work at KFC. But did he have a release plan? Did he have a network? People willing to hire him? A business? It's not, well, I want to be self-employed. What the hell does that mean? Is there a revenue stream to pay back your victims? KFC's fine. I presume all of you want to do something else, including being self-employed. It ain't going to happen if you just show up and tell them, build the record. I don't care if you haven't even pled guilty yet. Start writing it. If you've sat for the PSR, start writing it. If you're rich and you never need to work again and you want to volunteer, begin writing it, document it. Because if you don't have it over a sustained period of time, you're like every dude in jail, telling them you ain't showing them, and that's when you don't get what you want. Why? They're going to read the PSR, and if you haven't built a record that counters it or shows how you've learned, it's as Michael liked to tell me in prison, today you're full of a lot of happy talk. I'm going to get back to work. I want you to think about these things as you go through your own journey. You cannot associate with people who have a criminal record without prior permission from your probation officer. Look, some of the greatest businesses have been built in prison. I'm not saying it's a great business. I met Michael in prison. We built this business. We engineered a plan that would ensure we could work together upon our release. You can work with convicted criminals, with people you met in prison. You've got to get permission. You've got to document it. The reason they're against it is because studies suggest people who associate with people who have felony records are a higher likelihood to reoffend and go back to prison. So if you're going to work with someone you met in prison, you've got to write it out, you've got to develop it, you've got to share it, and you have to show a viable path to sustainability. Of course, making a diligent effort to satisfy any fines or restitutions. I remember I shared this story previously. There was someone who came home and his wife was a very successful mortgage broker, very successful. I think Idaho or Utah, made like nearly 7 figures a year. She owned the whole mortgage brokerage, whatever. And he was going to be Mr. Dad for a while, right? And the probation officer was like, I want you to make payments every month. He's like, I don't have any income. Sorry, have a nice day. I can't pay the $500 or 10%. I don't make any money. Really upset the probation officer because the probation officer said, do you live with your wife? Yes. Does she help pay for your car insurance? Yes. Your groceries? Yes. Your mortgage? Yes. Your kid's school? Yes. So let me get this straight, David, Mr. Defendant. You don't want to pay your court-ordered obligation, even though you told the judge you were guilty and you'll work to make amends and pay your restitution. You don't think you should pay because you don't have an income, but you'll let your wife's income help subsidize everything else, but not that. Horrific experience on federal probation, because this guy trying to find a loophole that said he doesn't have any income, he can't pay the probation. Do you think that probation officer allowed him to travel? That's a big negative. Think the probation officer supported him getting off probation early? That's a big negative. Think about these things. Please think about them, build them, document it, presuming you want the best outcome.
Michael, Justin, that's a challenge that I have had actually, because my wife is a very high income earner, and the job that I have, I do have a job actually, by the way, I'm not technically self-employed. One of the issues that I had was he looked at our income and our expenses, and of course we disclosed everything. And he said, well, your household, after I exclude all of these bullshit expenses, like, $4,000 a month in restaurants and all this other stuff, I can't count any of that. And so after we remove all of that, it shows, $3,000-ish of free income. I want you to pay half that. And I said, I don't know how to do that because it doesn't exist, right? So we had a bit of a kind of kerfuffle on this whole thing, and I just said, look, I will continue to make the payments regardless of what I make, even though I make minimum wage. And that was it. And it's been okay since then, but like that's a really important point that I think like is relevant for a lot of white collar folks.
I appreciate you sharing that, and you handled it responsibly. And admittedly, I've known some spouses who were like, I continue to pay the price for my husband's bad choices. I supported him in prison. And you understand the message. Now I got to pay his restitution while he's looking to build a new business.
That's my wife's argument. Exactly.
Thank you. I'll talk with Janelle soon enough if she needs to have a lawyer, but I get it. That's right. It's true. It's true. But if you know that you're going to be on probation for 3 years and the law allows you to try to apply for early termination after 1 year, it comes back to something I said a few weeks ago when we did a release plan webinar, and someone on the webinar called me afterwards and he said, I didn't want to leave this comment on the webinar because I didn't want to come off as like uppity, but he's like, Justin, I'm retired. I'm very successful. I'm going to prison for a short time. Like, do I really need a release plan? I mean, like, this seems, come on. Do I really, come on? I don't need a release plan. I'm released. Life is good. He doesn't need a release plan. But if you're looking to influence these people, you're going to create it. You're going to do it. If you're looking to influence your probation officer, you're going to pay the restitution, even if it's difficult or you don't want to. Part of the reason I had such liberty was because anytime I had a speaking engagement for a while, I would turn the whole honorarium over to probation. And it sucked because sometimes I really needed the money. I didn't pay my health insurance for 2 years when I came home from prison. But when I got a speaking event, Goldman Sachs or KPMG, all of it to restitution. That enabled me to have these liberties and things that I needed. I want you to think about that before your response might be, no, that's not my wife's responsibility, or no, I can't afford to pay that. Find a way, please. And you've got to begin building now while you're worthy of being self-employed, if that is indeed your goal, or if you're going to work with someone that has a felony conviction. Some of the greatest businesses are built from prison. Last one, we talked about requesting a new passport. If you're going to request a new passport, safety deposit box, opening a bank account, you do have to get permission from your probation officer. Even in one instance, someone with whom we worked was also getting fired from a lot of banks. And after he did his probation interview, he had to transfer several $100,000 to his wife because no bank would take his money. So he gifted it to his wife. But he thoroughly documented why he did that. So when he came home and he had no money, yet his wife had income or had assets, he had to explain why he did that and the process behind it. And the probation officer appreciated that rather than having them think, this guy's trying to get several $100,000 out of his wife's name so he doesn't have to pay restitution. Right? There are people who come home from prison, they begin to make money and they start to pay people back, because some of you have borrowed money to pay lawyers, restitution payments, commissary in prison. But if you haven't documented who's lent you money, and then you suddenly make a large payment and the probation officer sees it, they're going to say, what are you doing? I'm very transparent that I hired Michael in prison to help me write my book, Lessons from Prison. But I documented that I borrowed some money to pay him. So when I came home from prison and I made a payment at the time to his publishing company, and my probation officer saw it, I said to him, this is an expense that I documented. I'm making a payment on it. It was fine. But if you begin scratching checks to people without it being documented or disclosed to the PSR reporter after, they're going to say, here you go again, you're hiding money. You're not documenting it. You have to put yourself in the shoes of stakeholders at all times. So we wrap up probation. Some of the frequently asked questions we get: is my spouse responsible for probation, for restitution? We just discussed that. Why are they asking for her financial information? Look, when you're done with probation, you're going to get, or when you're on probation, if you owe money, you're going to get a letter from we call it the FLU, Financial Litigation Unit. And they're going to ask you for financial information. You, your kids, your wife, are you going to inherit any money? If you're going to respond, you should respond honestly. Some people get that, they throw it in the round file, they never hear from them again. In my case, I tended to hear from them frequently because I was so upfront about this and I was continuing to make payments. These are things I want you to consider. If you're going to get information and if you respond, you sign that document under penalty of perjury. Some of our people in our community get that letter from the financial litigation unit and say, I will answer my questions, but I'm not going to disclose what my wife has because I don't know. You want to subpoena her, fine. So just know if you answer it, everything has got to be answered honestly, or you put yourself in a position just to have more scrutiny, to go from low level of supervision to higher. Am I permitted to work for yourself on supervised release? Yes, presuming it's built into the release plan and it's documented and it's plausible and it puts you on a path to pay your restitution. Yes. Can you get off supervised release early? Yes, many people in our community have, as early as a year, including people that still owe millions of dollars in restitution. Build the release plan, share it with your judge, share it with the prosecutor, share it with your case manager, show how you have grown since your sentencing, and the probation report that paints you not necessarily in the best light. If so, what do I need to do to accomplish early termination? I just addressed that, build that release plan. If you have questions, I encourage you to speak to Scott or Kent about the release plan and how you should begin to build it. Again, if it's the wrong message, according to what federal judges have told us, turn in nothing if it's not going to be the right message. That said, I do want to have a couple other points I want to touch on before we transition over to any questions. I see a hand up. Cheryl, I'm getting better about calling on people's hands. It only took me 48 minutes. What is your question?
All right, quick question, because as you know, and some of the other people may know, I'm dealing with everything while Adam is in detention, and we're still not even at sentencing, and I've got a way to go. But since then, I've obviously been dealing with what a lot of other people have been dealing with, closed bank accounts and having to move things, and it is going to differ than what was on the report. So as long as I'm documenting, just keeping everything like a folder and having the documentation, I don't have to do anything until supervised release, or do you need to do something before? Do I just hang on to it in case it's questioned? Or
yes, I would keep very clear records, because as many of you know who have sat for your probation report, it's pretty extensive, the information they want. And all I can say to you is this: more to come. Okay, so the information they wanted, your probation report, your probation officer, Cheryl, is going to want the same information: tax returns, income, new bank accounts, LLCs, expenses. They'll appreciate it if you're really organized. So we have some people in our community that will give it to them on a thumb drive. Others provide them with the statements. It can be done via email, but you want to keep very clear records. And if you are moving money because a bank fires you, or if you're borrowing money to pay legal fees, you need to document all of that, because you're building this record.
okay, as long as things documented, he could present this to his probation officer when he's finally out, whenever that may be, but it all documented. Okay, I don't have to do any document any changes. Like, I don't have to report it to anybody at this moment.
You don't have to report them, but when he's asked, he's gonna turn it over, and you want to keep clear records. We have
okay, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, we have some people in our community, their parents or wife sends them, the brother sends them $400 a month in commissary. Over 2 years, that's 10 grand. They come home and they meet with the probation officer. You fill out the PICRA form. I think it's 80 or so questions where you have to answer as you start probation. Brandon or Matt, I'd like to, maybe you can touch on those questions in a second. But I know when I started probation, Isaiah Murrow gave me like the same, that was my probation officer. He gave me like the same packet I did when I did probation. So if I borrowed money, I included it on there because that was part of my monthly expenses. So part of my restitution payment was based on my net income. So make up a number of 10,000, taxes, printing of books, rent or mortgage, X amount is left, payment on a loan to parents or somebody. Then like my net income was X, I would make a payment based on that net income. But if I hadn't documented that I borrowed money, I'd have a higher net income, or you could think that I'm making up that I owe this money to reduce my net income and pay lower restitution. Clear records go such a long way, including, I mean, we have clients, they send $300 a month. They get it notarized when they come home. I sent you $10,000 at 5% interest you're going to pay me. It's notarized because that person tends to get paid back. The better record you have, the easier it is going to be to make that payment without the PO saying, why are you sending money to somebody in lieu of your restitution? You've got to be that deliberate, and you've got to really advocate for yourself at that level. Brandon or someone on Brandon, when you started probation, is it accurate that it's been so long for me, I've forgotten, they call it the PICRA. Did you sit with your probation officer or go through like 70 or 80 questions? Did you go through that?
Yeah, but he just sent it to me via email.
What are some of the questions? What are some of the questions?
So it's really kind of like random stuff. Like here, I'll pull it up real quick. And it's one of these like I agree, strongly agree, disagree, like one of those type of things, and you put in a number based on your response. So here's one. As I look back on it now, I was pretty good guy, even though I was involved in crime. And you have to say whether you agree or disagree with that statement. And there are exactly 80 questions that are just like that. And it's all sorts of things. Here's one that's change can be scary. There is nothing I can't do if I try hard enough. And they're basically just, I think, trying to evaluate your personality and your mental state at that point in time.
Got it. So I think you have to do that every year when you're on probation, and that you'll do that again in a year, I think. And that form will continually be, that PICRA form, as they call it, will be updated. That's a good exercise for all of you. So thank you for sharing that. Now, 1 second, as we wrap up probation. Those are my thoughts on probation. Now, I will put into chat, or Scott, perhaps you can do that. The link, well, I can do that right now. 1 second. I'm going to put up a link in chat to the interview with Chris Maloney for everyone. Okay, I'm putting in chat something I put up on my caller advice earlier, some of these common probation violations. When I send out this webinar replay, I will include the release plan template that Michael Santos wrote. I believe Michael is actually rewriting the release plan template to reflect administrative remedies and other information, but I will send that out in the next couple of days. Michael will also be doing a webinar tomorrow, I presume, to cover what he's learned about the First Step Act, some new updates. Michael's been on the road in prisons for a while, and he just wrote an article with Hugh Hurwitz, the former director of the BOP, that he sent out, and Michael's going to discuss that tomorrow. So webinar tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, covering First Step Act and other helpful information from Michael. I have a couple of other things to cover, unless there are any questions that I'm not addressing. Everything here. Okay. I asked all of you, and if you haven't watched it, please spend a few minutes to watch a sentencing video, a video that I filmed a few days ago that I sent out this morning from a sentencing hearing I attended last week in Los Angeles. And at the end of the video, I mentioned how the U.S. attorney told the judge, it's unlikely this person pays the money back. And I don't think she's accepted responsibility. And I think it's very unfortunate that a U.S. attorney would state in a courtroom that it's unlikely the person can pay the money back. But it speaks to their perception of you or people like us. They expect us, as this U.S. attorney said, she said sorry because she got caught. I don't think she's remorseful. In fact, he tried to take the 3 points of acceptance of responsibility away. So we encourage all of you, put yourself in the shoes of the stakeholders. What do they know about you? What don't they know about you? How do they perceive you? The makings of your release plan can even begin with, what did your judge say to you at your sentencing hearing? I attended a sentencing hearing. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was very hard on this defendant, like very, very hard. I think you may reoffend. You're a scam artist. You may be back in this courtroom. I don't necessarily believe you. Bad things bad things. Well, the person got a prison term. She's got all of this time to build a new record. So I want all of you, whether your judge said good things or bad things, or if you haven't even sat for your probation report, think how you can influence these people, because this probation report is the most important interview of your life, and it's going to influence this whole journey. Look years into the future and work your way back. Consider things that they're going to say to you. Okay, I see questions coming in. Now I do want to transition to Ron. I'm going to transition to a few things that Jason said. Now I'm going to read it to the left because there's a few things in here I'm not going to say. I'm going to use my discretion because I don't want it recorded. So I'm going to use my discretion. So Jason is in our community. He attended every webinar. He is surrendered to the federal prison camp in Montgomery. And he called me a few days ago and I asked him to send me some insights. Someone asked, what are the steps of getting early termination of probation? We cover that in that interview with Chris Maloney. Also speak with Scott or Kent if you have questions. Here are some things that Jason wrote about his first couple of weeks. I expected the Bureau of Prisons to screw up some things in my case, specifically the probation report. My PSR was properly amended through the guidance and work of our team. Some people are able to amend their pre-sentence report if it's not accurate. In this case, Jason surrendered and the amendment to the PSR didn't show up, and he was frustrating because without that amendment, it could impact his ability to get into program. And rather than complain and make a big deal, he stayed patient. He recognized he doesn't have to get into this program today. Rather than complain or yell at his case manager, he said, I'm going to stay patient, bide my time, follow the process because this is a big bureaucracy and I'm not going to freak out. He handled it correctly. Some people go rogue and get angry. Apparently, the amendment was not transferred properly. From there, we've been working to get it retransmitted to the courts and the BOP, specifically to the prison. That should happen. He mentioned that some things are unorganized. Specifically, one officer may tell you one thing and another officer tells you a different thing. Some of them keep to a schedule, some do not. Okay, that's part of the process. Number 3, sometimes there's a power struggle between the lower ranks of officers and the higher ranks of officers. Everyone, he wrote, wants to feel important. 2, there was an issue with some garments that he thought he was allowed to have. He wrote a cop-out through his case manager. Through that cop-out, nothing has happened. Brandon, you've been to prison. What exactly is a cop-out?
So it's simply a form that you fill out to make a request. It's a piece of paper. They give you a pencil, you fill it out with whatever your request is, and you submit it. Pretty standard stuff.
Got it. He then wrote number 5, inmates get caught every other day with cell phones. They catch every single person that uses the cell phone. Those individuals are immediately transferred to the county jail, never to return. A lot of cell phones in these prisons. He said, I did expect to fill out a cop-out for everything. I expected the TV room to be a source of entertainment and gambling. It's just not a spot for me. Things that I didn't expect to happen. Check-in at the visitor center is your first step in Montgomery. My family and children were treated with kindness and respect. The correctional officer that arrived in transportation van to take me to receiving and discharge calmed my wife down by assuring her that I was in a good place with nonviolent, forgive me, my mute is off, with nonviolent people. They made her stop crying and it calmed my nerves. My son rocks and they didn't show any emotions. Many correctional officers are very kind, very nice. And they did that with my mom. Sometimes when she would visit, she'd be a basket case and crying, and they would say, one guard, Joe, oh, you don't know what's on the other side here. He's having a good time. Don't worry. Once I arrived at receiving and discharge, there was some hostility. Michael Santos prepared me well with medical regulations for my medication and post-cancer compression garments. I was met with some frustration or hostility by the administrator, essentially telling him, you cannot bring all of that stuff here. I attempted to show her the documentation from my healthcare provider and the regulations Carol provided me, and she said, put that down. She then took her arms and raked my medical compression garment. She put my medical compression garments into a box to be mailed home. There wasn't much compassion. Luckily, I wore a spare pair that allowed me to, of glasses they allowed me to keep on. He then said Montgomery is 80% drug offenders, many of whom have come down from higher security facilities, 20% white collar. The racial makeup is 80% black, 15% white, 5% other. Wrapping up, he's saying absolutely no fighting or violence. Prisoners stand ready to help you. Drug offenders are super curious of white collar crimes, as I am equally curious of drug offenders. An abundance of hot water for showers, shredded chicken twice a day. Thankfully, an abundance of good vegetables, corn, rice, and beans. Breakfast at 5:30, lunch at 10:30, dinner at 4:30. So that's a little bit of breakdown of what Jason's experienced through a few weeks in Montgomery. Generally speaking, he's doing fine. Okay, it's now 11 o'clock. Are there any questions that we have, or any questions that I have not answered? I see, when will the release plan journal book be available? It says coming soon on the website. I have the old workbook that we can send you. In fact, I can even just send it to everyone right now. I'm going to put it here if you want to save it. So Michael is updating it, but this one is still relevant and something that you can use. 1 second, I'll put it right here. Here's the release plan PDF for everyone. Okay, I just attached it for everyone. I'd encourage you to begin working on it immediately, even if you have yet to sit for your probation report. Begin writing that release plan. Great idea. If you follow what the people we hire tell us to do. Hi, Bossy. Nice to see you. I've been denied early termination after a year despite paying on time. Their response is because I have restitution. Should I ask again? And yes, when would be appropriate? I have 1.5 years left. The number one reason people don't get off probation is if they continue to owe money. As compliant as I know you have been, that's the reason I didn't even bother to ask. So my approach, I would ask again if it's important to you. I know Nate Schott, who's in our community, he got off probation after 21 months on 36-month probation. He owed money. So my response, should you ask again, I would continue to build what you're building, how much you've paid, that you're going to continue to pay, that you've been law-abiding and compliant on probation. So I absolutely would ask again. And the worst thing they can say is no, and you do with humility and deference. I would ask again for sure. Dawson, are you still there? Did the U.S. attorney deny it? I think we lost her. The U.S. attorneys tend to.
They did.
Yeah, and
They
what
did.
did your probation officer support it, or did some of them don't have an opinion? They say I'm going to leave it up
She
to the
did.
judge.
She supported it, but he said because of my restitution and their internal policy that they deny all requests for people who have restitution to pay.
So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Now, but should I make payments for my restitution? I'm on pretrial. That's a big question. There are people who make payments at sentencing. It helps them get a shorter sentence. Some come to regret it because they could use those resources. Some make payments and it absolutely helps them. So if you've pled guilty, or even if you're convicted and you owe money, we've had people make payments. Even sometimes it's symbolic. Some people owe tens of millions of dollars in restitution and they may come up with a small amount, but relative to what they have, it's a lot. I know paying $100,000 at my sentencing, I think it bought me 6 months out of prison. I regretted doing that because I needed the money, but I also went to prison. I wasn't married. I didn't have children. So everyone's experience is different. Okay. But certainly making payments on pretrial can help. Some lawyers don't even want the money in their trust fund account. Some lawyers will say, let me coordinate with the U.S. attorney. You'll send it directly to the financial litigation unit. But I see no downside if you can afford it to making a payment before restitution. And I know many judges will absolutely appreciate it. David, good to see you. I see your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question about travel restrictions and during probation. You mentioned being denied going to Canada. Do they ever approve international travel?
Yes, some people on this comes back to the answer is yes. We have people in our community. I was going to look for a book we wrote with someone who went to Canada, Europe, Portugal, Argentina, Israel. So yes, you can absolutely leave the country on probation. Canada is a little harder. In that case, our client retained a lawyer, immigration lawyer, and they got it through pretty quickly. I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer, and I didn't really know to do that back then. But yes, you can leave the country. A lot of that approval will come down to what you're doing right now to prove worthy of it. Is it work related? Typically, they'll say no if it's related to personal business. It has to be work related. But yes, we've had many people in our community travel the globe pretty quickly on probation. But if you look at what they did, none of it was by accident. I share the story. Someone, a client of ours many years ago, many of you may have seen this company, Me Undies. Huge company. Jonathan Shokering went to prison for a year and a day. It's a great company. Built it from prison. Started building it before prison. Now it's probably $1 billion valuation. Jonathan, right on probation, went to Argentina, Israel, but he wrote every day in prison. He wrote to his probation officer. He wrote a blog. They knew him. They were waiting for him. They were impressed by his effort. So when people are like, you can't travel, no, some can. What are you doing to prove worthy of travel? You can't run your own business. Yes, you can. What are you doing to prove worthy of it? If you looked at how hard Jonathan worked from prison, it's no secret that he got everything he wanted off on probation. I want all of you to be thinking about that. And it helped that he didn't owe any money. Okay.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Is there a minimum amount of time that one has to spend on probation prior to applying? I think Chris Maloney said they want you to be on at least a year. I've had some probation officers tell clients, we really want to see you at least get to the 50% mark. But I think 1 year is the number, but some will say, I won't support it until you get to 50%. Okay. Any other questions? Someone said my
If
access.
I could add, Justin, real quickly, a little bit of legalese here, but it's very important. When you leave from prison, it's called supervised release. Whereas when I got sentenced, I got 5 years of probation, 2 years of house detention, not house arrest. Big difference as well. And I've never, well, I ended up going to prison for 30 days anyhow, on a VOP technical, as you'd say, 3 technicals. But anyhow, 30 days. But when you leave prison, and normally it's 3 to 5 years of supervised release. If you do like what I had, my judge gave me, and it was on a $1.5 million restitution, gave me pure probation with 2 years built into it. Supervised release and asset forfeiture, excuse me, supervised release versus probation. Supervised release is much more stringent because you did leave prison. They figured that the judge gave you the judge gave you prison sentence. You could be of some danger, and they don't really, whether you're white collar or a violent or drug crime, they kind of treat you the same. With probation, they figured that the judge figured, you didn't deserve prison time, and they're a little bit more lenient. But I will tell you, I had my problems too. For example, one of the things Brandon didn't leave out, one of the questions you ask every month, you have a financial report. If once they trust you, they'll let you do it online. They ask if you spend over $500 in any such thing. If you lie, that's a VOP. Yeah, it's a technical VOP, but it depends on your probation officer. So there is a difference. Supervised release, it's much tighter control, and with pure probation, it's not fun either, but they're a little bit more lenient, but not much more. Also, if you miss a restitution payment, the FLU, which is Federal Litigation Unit, you miss a payment. That's a violation of probation, and it depends on what type of probation officer. I had one that was extremely strict until they passed me off to one that was just lovely to deal with. So you don't want to miss. And those of you that will believe that after you're off probation, we call it off paper in legalese, and you're off probation, excuse me, off supervised release or probation, and you stop paying the Federal Litigation Unit. They may not do anything for a year or 2 years, but 3 years, they'll now it'll be a civil lawsuit, and they'll chase you down. They'll freeze your assets. They have ability to do that.
Well, and for everyone listening, that happened to me in 2018, and I can put up a YouTube video where I discuss it. But in 2012, I was done with probation. I continued to make payments, and then many years later, I was served with a subpoena, and the financial litigation unit sued me, and it was a very expensive experience. And I called the U.S. attorney and said, "I've never missed a payment. I've been off probation for 7 years. I paid my restitution from $535,000 down to $180,000. Why are you suing me?" And there was myriad reasons why, and I covered in that video if you want to watch it. But he's right? They are tracking you. They're following you, and some people never hear from them again. There are people that I know who owe millions of dollars. They're done with probation. They never send another penny, and they've never heard from them again. So sometimes it depends who the victim is. Are the victims calling the U.S. attorney saying, "I say this guy's building a business, driving a Corvette. Why aren't you collecting?" That kind of happened with Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. He owed $112 million. He paid very little of it back. Leonardo DiCaprio is playing him in a film. His victims are calling the U.S. attorney like, "What are you people doing? Where's our money?" So you may never hear from them again. People get the forms, they don't fill them out. You just want to remember, you're never really, they're always watching until that money's paid.
Right. Now, the asset forfeiture division, which is equal to your restitution, it's just money is just what I call cherry on top of the cake. And Senator Grassley and the Republican senators are really, really for prisoner rights. You don't want to You definitely don't want a conservative judge. You want a liberal judge. But when it comes to everything else, the Republicans are really big on being senators and even the judges on defendants' rights. So the asset forfeiture, which is called, it's just money in the coffers, that's been ruled on so many times, but still hasn't been changed. They don't have the resources of the federal litigation unit. And usually the asset and federal litigation unit don't know what one hand's doing with the other. But the asset forfeiture, if I hadn't opened up the case myself on that asset forfeiture, they would just left me alone. I was in pile 4 because I paid off my 1.5 million restitution. It took me 4 years, but I paid it off. And that's called, they put you in 4 piles. Pile 4, they just leave you alone. That's where I was until I brought up the case. Bad attorney advice. There, I wrote a pro se motion. The other thing I was going to tell you is that I just want to make sure that I'm looking at my law books. After 1 year of supervised release, if it's 3 years, if it's 5 years, after 1 year, you can try to write your motion to the judge. If you're on probation, you got to wait a half a year. But Justin's given extremely accurate information. If you didn't pay your restitution, you're not getting off. But I know that one of your clients did, correct, Justin?
Dr. Schott did. Nate was a dentist in Tennessee. That's right. A lot of it comes down, it's a subjective process, right? Some probation officers might be more willing than others to give more liberty. It's just, you don't know. I mean, there's a chance you could write the best reentry plan that you articulate everything you're planning to do, and it might not have the influence on that person that you would like. That's just part of this process. But you're correct. Someone in our community was able to get off early. It is a little bit harder with restitution.
And I give my last tip. I'm making my last tip that I just learned from law school. I'm taking all my electives now last semester. Is that, and I did it innately. I just thought about doing it. Is that my restitution was $10,000 a month because I was basically disabled when they raided my office. I'm a surgeon, but and that's, they go after you if anything little happens, an increase, but there is no increase. This is one after me. But one thing that I did was I paid it on a monthly basis, so I do it in a cashier's check. What I would do is I would take a picture of me at the bank, take a picture of the check, and a picture of me mailing it. So like they can see it, and it's in the mailbox. And I would send that not only to my probation officer, not only to the federal litigation unit, but they all three were copied, and even to my prosecutor. Well, why should I send it to my prosecutor? Because you want to be transparent to almost to annoyance. They got 3 separate emails. I didn't put them all together, 3 separate emails, and they're getting this for 24 months and beyond. So when you write for, to get off probation, and I got off at 37 months out of a 60, the officer was so sick of getting emails that it's something they just taught me in law school. I learned it to help with your clients to be transparent, to be almost annoying that, you're so transparent. It's ridiculous. And remember, they're going to, when you write a motion to the judge, they're going to ask the prosecutor to give her what's called opinion. And the judges usually go by the opinion, but the prosecutor, but not always, and your probation officer as well, for both of them to weigh in.
So this is good practical information that he's endured, and we can learn from that. And we all have slightly different experiences, but what's similar is if you owe money, they're going to work to collect. Someone asked about, I've loaned money years ago and people are paying me back and it hasn't been documented. It's not a problem, but the question is, are you stronger? Are you stronger if you have evidence? It's like, are you stronger if you go to sentencing if you have evidence of rehabilitation, evidence of reform? Are you stronger with a case manager if you show them why you're worthy of more liberty instead of telling them? So you're stronger if you have evidence that you've loaned money and you're now getting caught up on your records. So no, it's not a problem, but you have to understand they may view you cynically. And so we'd encourage you to document it and to create a record, including what some people do, which is getting it notarized and getting it stamped. This is how much money, kind of like a loan. When you buy a house, you get an amortization schedule. These are the payments. This is the interest. This is principal. This is when it's due. It's not hard to do. Google it. You can come up with a amortization calendar schedule in 7 minutes.
Just to be a little jovial, one of my criminal defense professors, you use the word cynical. You have to really understand that, and that's a nice word to use. It's a euphemism. The judge, especially the prosecutor, they look at you and the probation officer, during whatever you do, you have to document, because they don't look at you cynically. They look at you as a scumbag. No matter if it's white collar, drugs, whatever it is, they look at you as a scumbag. You're just a piece of dirt scumbag as soon as you get your felony. And that's something we have to live with the rest of our lives. We have that felony tag, but of course, in the state of Florida, 1 out of 3 do, by the way. So you have to have documentation. Every little thing, like you talk about loan money, you better have documentation to show it during sentencing. This is what I'm also getting. And the judge gets impressed.
I also believe the judge and stakeholders get impressed, because you're not just telling them, you're showing them. And I've been to many sentencing hearings where the judge says, come back and see me when you're home. I want to see how you did. And if you're doing well, I'll consider getting you off probation early, which is why a lot of times we're discussing preparing for prison, avoiding problems in prison. Very important. Now we kind of went to the end and we're reverse engineering our way back. You're going to be on probation, and we know you want the job approved, travel, early termination, higher levels of liberty. But everything we've learned from experts, a lot of that success will hinge on what you do right now, the records you're building. I mean, recently we began helping with someone. He just got the SEC target letter, but it's inevitable the DOJ investigation is coming, and he may cooperate. It could be 3 years until sentencing, 3 years. But he's building a record, a sustained record over this period of time that he's working, volunteering, the consequences. Does that make him look stronger to sentencing hearing? Probably. So those are things we want all of you to think about as you go through this journey, and never buy into the mistaken presumption that it's too early to prepare. I just got indicted. I haven't been sentenced yet. I hired a former US attorney who does that. Great. Fine. In our experience, the work that you do every day influences these people the most. If there aren't any other questions, I see someone's hand up. Is that Paul, top left?
Hi, but it's Amy, his wife.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Justin.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you too. It was a question, actually, I think Patty asked. It's about restitution. My husband's only 16 days into Otisville camp on a year and a day. But we paid all fines and restitution beforehand. Patty's question was, are our finances going to be highly scrutinized when he's finished his sentence and on probation, even though he doesn't owe any restitution?
Much less, because
Okay.
you've been paid in full. I mean, we've had some people in our community, they paid it in full. The probation officer said, I just don't want to, I don't need to see the financials every month. You're in a much stronger position if fines or restitution is paid, and that positions you to get off probation early as
Okay.
well. And it's a great position to be in. I'm very happy to hear that.
Right. Yes. I mean, it was all paid before he even went into sentencing, but
Do you
yeah,
think it helped, by the way? Do you think it helped?
I do. His lawyer did say to him that the day before sentencing that I think the lowest you will get is 16 to 18 months. And he got a year and a day. So I think it helps. I think that's the lowest she could give him.
Right.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear all that. He was facing how much?
What didn't you hear? She was mentioning, she had commented that she.
What was the sentence Paul was facing?
A year and 1 day.
No, but originally, like,
Well, based on the points from the first probation officer, 41 to 53 months.
oh wow, okay, that's amazing.
And then the lawyer said 16 to 18 months and you'll be lucky. And he got 12 months, 1 day.
Wow.
Everyone, I just put up a link to a YouTube video I filmed a couple of years ago called the pros and cons of making a restitution payment before sentencing. But in there, I also walked through what happened when the financial litigation unit sued me and the process they went through to collect. So I put a link to that. If anyone owes money, and you have not seen that video, I would watch it. Okay. Let's see if there's any other questions that have not been answered. I don't think so. Okay, my judge commented on the fact I made full amends before sentencing and commended me for it. I was facing 21 to 27 months and I received 4 months. There you go. I mean, there are some judges where it can really impact them. I attended sentencing hearing many years ago where Judge Selna in Orange County told the defendant, I want to see how much more money you can come up with. I want to see you in 3 months. So these judges have discretion and it can really impact your sentence. Jeff, thank you for saying great information. So grateful that you're here. Okay, everyone. So we're going to wrap it up. Let me wrap up with the resources we have here. The link to the interview with Chris Maloney. I'd encourage you to listen to it. We'll position you for probation. Go through the release plan that we attached. Watch the video on pros and cons of restitution. Michael is going to do another webinar tomorrow at the same time. You can expect to get that email later today from him. I will also send it out. Short of that, I think that's a wrap.
Thank you, Justin.
Great seeing all of you. Thank you so much for joining our community. We'll see you again tomorrow on our bonus webinar. We're doing it's a bonus tomorrow. That's what we're going to call it. Okay. I'll see all of you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.